Hey guys, welcome to Brian's Man Cave. So today I'm just going to be doing a little discussion video talking about video game licensing. Now, this kind of came to me because, well, I just got home from the hospital myself. Don't worry, I didn't have anything serious. It was just a scheduled operation that I needed to have. So I had to be there overnight. I was there yesterday, and I had to spend the night there. And also, obviously, I had my phone with me, and I'm going through YouTube. I'm watching some of my favorite YouTubers. And one of the guys that I watched was Mr. Postile, also Papa Pete. And they both were doing video gameplay of Masters of the Universe for the Intellivision. And one of the things that Mr. Postile, I believe it was Postile that brought up, was that they wanted to make a, well, after the Intellivision kind of, like the Mattel Intellivision kind of crumbled, and an INTV Corp came along, they wanted to make a sequel to the Masters of the Universe, and they ran into licensing problems. They couldn't do it. It probably either would have cost too much, or maybe they just didn't want to give them the permission to do it. You got to figure out who owns the rights. You got to go through all that red tape and all that other stuff. And what eventually happened to that game was it ended up becoming a Burger Time sequel called Diner, which is kind of interesting. And it got me thinking while I was watching the video. I'm thinking, you know, licensing, it's a good thing and it's a bad thing. It's got its pluses and it's got its negatives. I mean, you could easily make games like this. This is boxing for the Atari. This was made by Activision, but it's boxing. It's just boxing. Well, this one says La Boxe because it's the French version, French-Canadian version. But the point is, it's boxing. Intellivision has a game called Boxing. Any system can come out with the name Boxing, and you'll never have a problem. You could port this any way you want. It's boxing, right? It's not Evander Holyfield. It's not Mike Tyson, which that one in itself has some interesting history. If you look at the NES version, the Mike Tyson's Punch-Out game, and then later on dropped the Mike Tyson thing and just went to Punch-Out, which was interesting. They got rid of Mike Tyson. They put in a new character called Mr. Dream, which is essentially like Mike Tyson. But anyways, that was, again, another issue of, you know, having a name attached to it, or, you know, a company or whatever. So, interesting enough, the same thing kind of with, like, Donkey Kong. If you think about Donkey Kong, originally, when the programmer was making the game, he wanted to do Popeye. That's what he wanted. He wanted to do Popeye. It was going to be Brutus or Bluto, whatever you call him, at the top, throwing down the barrels and trying to get Popeye. And of course, because of the rights and all that stuff, couldn't do it. They tried. They couldn't get the permissions, and he just said, forget it. Let's take the idea. Let's still go on with the game. Let's make our own, which became Donkey Kong. And Donkey Kong, I think, translates to stubborn donkey or something like that. Something like that. So he probably translated a lot of this just as a way to get back. And then, funny enough, because of Donkey Kong, they almost got in trouble by the King Kong Corporation, who thought that that was their rights and that they're stealing King Kong. So again, it's another issue of licensing. You know, they're coming after you, both ends, no matter what you do. But really what I wanted to focus on was, you know, we do remember games like this one, which is notorious, the E.T. game for the Atari 2600. I'm sure most of you know this, the backstory, the lot where they found all the cartridges. You all know that. But this game was like one of the first to really license. In fact, it might have been the very first game to license. Because I know this came out, Raiders of the Lost came out, well, Raiders of the Lost Ark came out, both programmed by Howard Scott Warshaw at the time. But yeah, that was groundbreaking for its day, you know, taking something, instead of saying boxing, and giving it a movie title and a franchise to go along with it. But what they didn't think of at the time was what happens later? What happens when that licensing deal expires? They got this game that was programmed. Say they want to put out a compilation cartridge, or, well, you know, at the time they didn't have CDs. But, you know, later, eventually they got the CDs and stuff where they could create these compilations. Today you got that Atari 50th anniversary thing, but you're not going to find things like E.T. on there because of a licensing issue. They're not going to, like, the amount of effort and time it would take to go and get the rights from whoever owns ET, Steven Spielberg or whoever owns it, whatever studio owns it, get the rights, pay for it, because it wouldn't be cheap, just to put out a video game that's already been programmed a long time ago that they already paid for. And it's something that they don't think about because, they have their own titles. Like I said, Adventure, not Venture, Adventure. A game that has a very plain name. It says what the game is all about. It's an adventure. But they could have easily licensed this out to anything. Like the Intellivision, they had an adventure game that they called Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. So their adventure game was similar. I mean, you're running around tunnels and stuff, and you're trying to find treasure and stop the dragon. They both had their games. But the Intellivision one was Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. And of course, that was owned by, what's the name? LGR or something? Which later then became Wizards of the Coast. Again, you're running into licensing issues. Now, if they want to release the game, they have to change the name. And I think that's what they did. When Intellivision, or the Blue Sky Rangers, I should say, when they put the game out on compilation, on the Intellivision Lives, I believe they just called it Cloudy Mountain. And at the time, we only knew it as Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, which then again, I think later then became Advanced Dungeons and Dragons Cloudy Mountain. Because then they also made Tower of Dooms and all that other stuff. But anyways, yeah, my point is that they really didn't think too far ahead when they're doing this. And I guess it makes sense. At the time, they're just thinking, you know what, we just want to use this and get the market. Pretty much every time a movie came out during the 90s, a game came out with it. Die Hard, almost every single Arnold Schwarzenegger film had one. Predator, you name it, Terminator. There was a game. Even silly movies or Christmas movies like Home Alone had a game. Had several games. It was on like Game Boy. It was on Super Game Boy. It was or Super Nintendo. Like they really milked it. They even made like TV series like Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen stuff on Game Boy. And all these games were programmed by serious programmers. They were all labeled. They were all put out there. And now what? All these games are all under all these licensing. So now in the future, you either have to obtain an original copy of that game if you want to play it, like actually get the cartridge. You have to have the system that it runs, whether it's GameCube or, it could be anything, right? Like, how many systems have we had since the Atari 2600 alone? I mean, geez, every year or every 2 years or something, it felt like there was a brand new system out. PlayStation 2, Xbox, you name it. Wii U, Switch, and all these great games that were created for them all have these licensing names on them that in the future make it really hard for them to re-release these games for us to play. Now, of course, you're probably just sitting there going, I'm just going to emulate them anyways. Of course, you could do that. You can go and find the ROMs and emulate them. But that's not as fun as when they actually could re-release these games, put them onto like that Atari 50 Vault thing. Because I'm sure a lot of people, when they bought that, and they're seeing all the games that are missing, all the great games that they loved. And I always kind of found that annoying. Like when I bought some of those compilations, I'm like, where's that game and this game, and where's Ghostbusters? Like all these great titles that, I guess at one point they had licensing rights to put them out, and then no more. And then it becomes who knows it, who owns it, and what. Of course, that's until something becomes public domain. Once that happens, then we get something like what's going on in the movies soon. There's a Winnie the Pooh movie coming out where it's a horror movie, and Winnie the Pooh's had it and he's killing everybody. And so they made that because public domain, license expired, have at it. Anybody can now make Winnie the Pooh. And maybe that's something to take a cue from, like something, me being a developer myself now, making my own games for the Intellivision, is, I always have to worry about licensing issues. If I wanted to make a game based off a movie, I can get sued. So maybe I should look into public domain and be like, hey, I can make a Winnie the Pooh movie. Well, I probably won't, but you know what I'm saying. Like, I can use that and not have any drawbacks. Anyways, yeah, I thought that this would be a fun topic to throw out there. It just kind of stuck in my head when I was watching it, you know, the whole Masters of the Universe for the Intellivision and the licensing behind it. Anyways, let me know what you think. Throw some comments down below. Hope you subscribe. We'll talk to you later.